Hello and welcome back to my channel. In this video, we'll be reviewing tips for the removal and replacement of the positive crankcase ventilation valve on this 2024 Hyundai Elantra with the 2.0 liter engine. If you find my tips to be helpful, please like, subscribe, and comment. Now let's get started. The positive crankcase ventilation valve is located right here underneath the valve cover. Some of the symptoms associated with a faulty valve include rough idle, increased fuel consumption, colored exhaust, excessive suction on the oil cap, oil leaks if the valve is stuck in the closed position, burning oil if the valve is stuck in the open position. You'll also have a check engine light with the trouble code P0171, which will indicate a lean fueled condition. What's happening is the valve is stuck in the open position and the crankcase gases are flowing in through the intake. The ECU recognizes the crankcase gases as fuel, but the crankcase gases do not contain the same level of octane that the fuel contains. And so therefore, you get a code that triggers a lean condition as if you're not getting enough fuel. So you may ask, what does this part do? Positive crankcase ventilation valve is a one-way valve that routes harmful crankcase gases back into the combustion chamber to be burned as part of the air-fuel mixture. Our supply list includes a 10mm socket, an extension, a ratchet, a pair of pliers, and a very small screwdriver. Please see other items in the description below. So at this time, let's go ahead and move forward with the removal of the valve cover. And then once we have the valve cover loose enough, I'm gonna go inside and pull out the positive crankcase ventilation valve, and we'll have a quick discussion of that. So let's talk about this valve cover real quick. And so I'm just gonna point them out, starting with the lower right corner. So 1, 2, 3, and some of the bolts are in place just for demonstration purposes, but they're loose. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 bolts along the perimeter, unless I missed one. And then there are interior bolts. 1, 2, and 3. You'll also have to remove the bolts for the ignition coils. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So let's quickly go through the bolt removal, and then I'll stop and show you some other things that have to be removed. So all of these bolts are the same length. This valve cover has about 20 bolts holding it in place. So what that one was, there's one right here, and then there's one right there, okay? Okay, and then don't forget these 3. That's it for what I call the shorter bolts. Now let's talk about the longer bolts, okay? These are for the ignition coils. All right. Next, what we're going to do is remove the ignition coils. And I like to keep everything in order. So carefully pull it out, set it right there. Pull it out, set it right there. Pull it out. Okay. The valve cover should be loose enough to where you can start taking a screwdriver and lifting it up on the corners. Like that, okay? Now obviously I loosened it up earlier, so it's a lot looser now, but I'm showing you a way. See how I'm using the engine block to leverage that corner right there? But do it very slowly. So lift here, just a little bit, come over here, a little bit, small. Work your way around the side, just lifting straight up. Use the engine block for leverage. And once I got all that front area loose, I said, okay, what do I have to loosen up now? I don't want to break any wires, but I also don't want to loosen up any unnecessary wires. And I'll have to mention that I had already loosened up the coil wires, okay? So there is a variable valve timing wire that looks like it's pretty short here. So I went on ahead and disconnected it. There's a wire connected to the camshaft position sensor for the intake. I disconnected that, and then I disconnected this hose right here. And that hose was on really tight, and so I'll let you guys know, I took a pair of pliers and I just worked it back and forth, put a little tension on it, and then I pulled it off after loosening up the clamp. My valve cover is pretty loose. I have no intention on taking it all the way off. So I'm just going to lift up on it like that. Feels pretty loose. And I'm looking to make sure there's no bolts. You'll know if the bolts are still there because you won't be able to move. Before I go any further, I want to mention that you should take a blower or some sort of spray can and spray and remove all the dirt in this area. Now I'm lifting it up only enough to look. This little bump here says PCV. And so I'm looking under there and it says PCV. Okay. So I went in with my needle nose pliers and I very carefully pulled it out. That's all I did. There you go. And there you have it. That's your positive crankcase ventilation valve. And so I'm just going to do a quick inspection. First, I'm going to listen to whether or not it's stuck. So, nope, it's not stuck. I'm looking at the O-ring. The O-ring is pliable and it's not brittle. You look here, there's not any buildup. It's nice and clean. I would say that this valve is in good working order. However, if you were to remove this and if it was full of black sludge, or if the car was indicating any of the symptoms that I talked about earlier in the video, I would simply replace this valve. Do not attempt to clean this valve. There's way too much trouble to remove and replace this valve to be cleaning it. It's not worth your time. I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this valve and move on with this video. So I'm going to lift up the cover. And now the O-ring goes down in the lower position, the lower half of the valve. Okay? So simply take and push it up. And the O-ring fits real snug and you just slide it up. Just like that. And it should not come back down. There you go. And now we're just reassembling everything. I'm going to lift up the valve cover straight up and then place it straight down on this hard rubber gasket. Okay. So now I'm going to start in this corner and I'm just going to tap. And I'm going to work my way around. Now I'm in this far right corner. Tap, and I'm going to do it one more time. So now I'm going to start installing the perimeter screws. First, I'm just going to drop them in place. By dropping them in place, helps me to make sure that I have all of the screws. Okay? And you guys can see all the locations as I'm putting them back in. And while I'm putting in the screws, I want to let you know, since the positive crankcase ventilation valve doesn't throw a code, I call this the silent engine killer. because if the valve is stuck in the open position, you're going to be burning fuel, you're going to be throwing a lean code condition, which will make you want to change the O2 sensor. You change out the O2 sensor and the problem is still there. It doesn't go away. So you buy it, you say, okay, I'm going to buy another O2 sensor. After your third O2 sensor, you take it in to get repaired and the guy says, oh, it wasn't your O2 sensor, it was your positive crankcase ventilation valve. Okay? That's one reason. The second reason is that, let me talk and chew gum at the same time. Oh boy, I dropped the screw. The second reason is that if the valve is stuck in the closed position, what you're going to have is built up pressure in the crankcase. Okay, let me find this screw real quick. Okay, I got lucky. Fell right on the ground and there was not an engine cover to deal with. Thank goodness. Okay, so now I have all of my short screws in there. And so what you'll want to do is tighten up the valve cover from the inside out. Okay? The first thing I'm going to do is just quickly go around and snug up all the screws. I've installed all of the perimeter screws snug. And I've also installed the interior screws snug. Now, at this point, as I mentioned before, what you want to do is tighten down the gasket from the center outward. Okay? This is a hard rubber gasket, so you can torque it down, but it's only going to compress so much. Don't over tighten it. Right now it's snug, and start here, and I'm just going to put a little pressure on each location. That's it. And you see I'm right in the middle. And that's about how tight they were to start with. They were not tight. I'm just snugging them down. And then, once again, working from the inside out. All of these, now just like that, that, and that. That side's done. I'm going to repeat the same process over here. Snug. I think I got this one already. Yep. Oops, I think it jumped out of order there. You guys know what I'm trying to do, okay? And there you have it. And then I always go around one more time. What I counted, 15, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I think it was 14. I think that one was a little loose. That's how I do it. So the next step is we're going to reinstall the ignition coils. Carefully wiggle, drop them in place. Wiggle, drop it in place. Just have to be snug. Okay. And so while we're working on the coils, let's just go ahead, bring out the wires, and get the coil wires installed. It's like that belongs like that. So pull out the locks. Pull the locks to the out position. See that gasket's trying to get away from me. Okay. So look at the gasket. Gasket looks good. Lock it. There you go. Gasket looks good. Slide it in place. You can see here, I'm following the length of the wire to make sure I'm going to the right location. Rubber gasket looks good. Good. This rubber gasket's a little moving around on me a little bit. So I just go in there, push it down. There you go. Lock it. There you go. These are all locked and in place. Don't have to worry about those anymore. Okay, now I'm working from the back of the cover, and I'm going to reconnect anything that I disconnected. So starting with this VVT connector, looking at the gasket. Okay, hard to see. All right, then I see the camshaft position sensor. Lock that down. Last thing we have here is our rubber hose from the secondary breather. Use my pliers. Slide down the hose clamp. Get it to be about 1/4 of an inch from the end of the rubber. Take one good look around, left to right, sweep over it. Perimeter screws, internal screws, ignition coils, connectors, wire, hose. Well, folks, that wraps up this video on the removal and replacement of the positive crankcase ventilation valve on this 2024 Hyundai Elantra with the 2.0 liter engine. I hope you found my tips to be helpful. Please like and subscribe. And until next time, drive defensively.